Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting this evening from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm joined tonight by Stephen Young, who is doing double duty this evening by running our graphics as well as manning the cameras out in the field. It's been another news-filled day for SpaceX. Right now you're looking at Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40, where SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket standing by at the ready to launch another batch of Starlink satellites. In about an hour, SpaceX will attempt to launch the mission known as Starlink Group 6-14. This will be the 17th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites. More on those as we go throughout the broadcast. So we are now T-minus 56 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 11:12 p.m. Eastern. For our viewers around the world, that's 03:12 UTC, the morning of Saturday, September 9th. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you get notifications when you ring the bell, to get notified when new videos are posted and you don't miss any of our live streams. And if you could share the stream, that would also be a big help in assisting more people in finding our live coverage and everything else going on with our channel. And naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without the assistance of our viewers like you, as well as our channel members. So thank you to folks like Don Coy, who joined at the launch director level. Helps improve our coverage of the space program, both our members as well as those who help by contributing with a YouTube super chat. Love to include all of our folks in the live chat as part of the conversation, and YouTube super chats help bring you into that conversation, help us improve our coverage of the space program. Going back to channel membership for a moment, it also grants you special discounts in our online shop, as well as 4K launch views when we do have missions going up from Florida Space Coast, as we do tonight. We also have special member-only videos on our YouTube channel here. In fact, we have one going up in just a little bit. Had a conversation with the principal investigator for the OSIRIS-REx mission, which is bringing back a sample of asteroid Bennu, getting ready to touch down in the Utah desert. That sample return mission wrapping up on September 24th. Had the opportunity to speak with Dante one-on-one earlier today, and that conversation will be a member-only video going up in just a little bit here, so just one of the videos you get to access as one of our channel members. Now T-minus 53 minutes, 10 seconds and counting from the launch tonight. We're about 20 minutes or so away from the point at which the launch director would give the results of the go-no-go poll for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. However, as with the last mission from the Space Coast, the Starlink 6-12 mission, SpaceX is no longer providing mission audio, at least as of now. And so we, unfortunately, are not able to include that as part of our broadcast for you tonight. But as we've covered numerous Starlink missions, numerous Falcon 9 launches, we are quite familiar with the nominal launch procedure for a Falcon 9 rocket. And so we will keep you apprised to the best of our abilities on the fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket here tonight. See on your screen. let you know how the count is going, some of those visual cues that you can follow along with us, and we'll take you through the count. SpaceX is running the countdown from its Hangar X site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center at the Hangar X facility, where they refurbish Falcon 9 boosters and prepare them for future flights. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 11:12 p.m. Eastern. That's 03:12 UTC. If needed, SpaceX does have one additional backup opportunity in this launch window that's coming up at 11:30 p.m. or 03:30 UTC. And if for whatever reason neither of those opportunities pan out, they do have 3 backup opportunities tomorrow. That is Saturday, September 9th, starting at 7:25 p.m. Eastern, running until 10:59 p.m. Weather tonight, something we've certainly been keeping an eye on throughout the afternoon. Coming into tonight's launch attempts, the 45th Weather Squadron here forecast 60% favorable weather at the start of the window and improves to 85% near the back end. Right around 6 o'clock, there was an announcement here at KSC that the strong wind warning in the area had lifted. About that same time, the Phase 1 lightning watches were also taken down, so things were seemingly on a good track weather-wise. However, as we approached 7 o'clock, SpaceX punted on their opportunity and decided to launch. Now at targeting 11:12, they passed upon that 7:56 launch opportunity that they had earlier tonight. Would have been a beautiful just after sunset liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. But that's all right. There'll be plenty of opportunities for sunset launches down the road. And again, concerning those backup launch opportunities, if for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch tonight, weather during those backup periods is also on a bit of a gradient. Starts at about 70% favorable, increases to 90% go weather throughout the course of tomorrow's launch opportunities. But the weather again is trending pretty well tonight. We've not had a rain for quite some time this evening. The clouds are starting to part, setting up a good opportunity for, again, T0 liftoff at 11:12 p.m. Now T-minus 49 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. Again, we do want to extend our appreciation to those of you who help us out with the Super Chat donation. So thank you to Fiona for your $20 Super Chat. Really appreciate you supporting our channel at that level. We hope you enjoy the rest of the launch coverage tonight. As we are now T-minus 48 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Do want to give you an update on the countdown timeline as it stands now, as SpaceX is targeting currently 11:12 p.m. Eastern. Again, because SpaceX is not broadcasting mission audio, we will not hear the call-outs for these milestones, but want to give you a sense of how the timeline of this countdown is going to progress. So let's go over that now. Again, T-minus 38 minutes again is when the launch team would be receiving the results of the go, no-go poll for the started propellant load. As the go is given, then at T-minus 35 minutes, RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene will start to flow aboard both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9. At the same time, liquid oxygen will also start being pumped aboard the first stage. At T-minus 16 minutes, liquid oxygen starts flowing onto the second stage of the Falcon 9. Before that, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back at the launch pad as the feed lines are chilled. Comes at about T-minus 20 minutes, give or take. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, we'll see the strong back retract begin, moving away from the Falcon 9 rocket. First, you'll see the clamp arms that are just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the strong back will tilt back about 1.5 degrees, just a slight lean away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point the strong back then pulls back much more rapidly to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes to liftoff, liquid oxygen loading will be complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. 45 seconds out, the launch director will give their final go for liftoff, at which point the engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all is healthy and everything is proceeding nominally, the flight computer will give the command to release the hold-down clamps of the Falcon 9 and lift off at T0. Currently targeting a liftoff time of, again, 11:12 p.m. Eastern. That's 03:12 UTC on September 9th. Now T-minus 45 minutes, 19 seconds. Again, referring back to the countdown we just reviewed, we are about 10 minutes away, assuming the launch director gives their go for the startup propellant load at 38 minutes away from liftoff. 10 minutes from now is when propellant will start flowing onto the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket for liquid oxygen, both the first and second stages for the RP-1. Again, without the mission audio, we will not hear that call out, but a good visual indication is by looking at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, where you'll start to see a little bit of venting. Unlike some previous launches, though, because there's some work being done out on the pad to make way for the upcoming crew access tower, there's a crane that you see there in the middle of your screen just in front of the Falcon 9 rocket from our vantage point. It'll become much more apparent at liftoff when you see those 9 Merlin engines really illuminate the pad and you can see it much more clearly. We'll talk about the crew access tower in just a little bit. Now T-minus 44 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. T-minus 40 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. As we approach the start of propellant load, which is expected to begin in about 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a moment and talk about where this rocket will be going once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Taking a look here at a satellite view of Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This is where the Falcon 9 rocket will lift off from. It'll fly in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean and following stage separation. The first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. On deck tonight is one of the 2 that's stationed here on the East Coast. That is a shortfall of Gravitas. The upper stage, of course, will continue on with the Starlink satellites. And the fairing halves will jettison a bit downrange of this map as well. SpaceX has 2 recovery ships it uses to scoop up the fairing halves. Tonight they're going to be using the ship called Doug. It and the other recovery ship, Bob, were named after the NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo that flew aboard the Demo 2 mission in May 2020, really kicking the era of the commercial crew program into high gear, with the first crew launch from American soil since the end of the shuttle era. Now T-minus 39 minutes and counting. T-minus 37 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. We are less than 3 minutes away from the start of propellant load. SpaceX did state that all systems on the Falcon 9 rocket looking good for tonight's launch of 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. They say weather is better than 90% favorable for liftoff, so definitely a big improvement from earlier on this afternoon. So all moving well for a liftoff of the Falcon 9 at 11:12 tonight. Again, fielding set to begin at T-minus 35 minutes, coming up just about 2 minutes from now. Now T minus 35 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. We're less than a minute away from the start of propellant load on the Falcon 9 rocket. Appreciate the nearly 2,500 of you that are joining us for our live coverage tonight. This will be the first of 2 launches within, oh gosh, less than 12-hour time frame. So we are also looking forward to an early morning launch of United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket. That's coming up tomorrow morning. We'll have much more on that, as well as its own dedicated live coverage. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Do appreciate those of you who are here with us this evening late on a Friday night. If you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, share the stream. Both are exceedingly helpful in helping us to share this coverage, help more people find it as we continue on with the count. Now less than 35 minutes to go. At this point, SpaceX will have already given the go-ahead for the start of propellant loads. So again, keep your eyes peeled to the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. We'll start to see some vapor there forming near the base. Again, it's a little bit obscured tonight, as you can see in the center of your screen. It's a little dark right now, but there is a construction crane there, which is blocking, unfortunately, most of the Falcon 9 rocket from our vantage point. But you see the object that's in front of it. That is part of the upcoming crew access arm, or excuse me, crew access tower that SpaceX is currently developing. Thank you, Stephen. This is a zoomed-in shot. The image on your right, that inset picture, is from when they rolled out that segment to begin stacking. That was just earlier this week. SpaceX is adding redundancy to its abilities at Launch Complex 39A, where it can currently launch both crew and cargo to the International Space Station. SpaceX is working on creating redundant capabilities at Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And this is the first tower segment that has been installed. Last month, after the earlier after the return of, or after the launch of the Crew 7 mission, I should say, there's been a lot of activity out here in Florida. After Crew 7 launched the International Space Station, in the post-launch press conference, we did talk with both NASA and SpaceX about the construction of that tower and when its first use is going to be. Plan is for them to launch a cargo mission to the space station first. And right now you're taking a look at the video of that rollout when that first segment made its way past our cameras on its way to Slick 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Of course, this is not how fast it was actually going. You're looking at a time-lapse video, so it actually did move quite quickly, but just not this quickly. We're abridging it for the sake of brevity for this conversation. Again, SpaceX and NASA are preparing to use it for the first time sometime in 2024, although they have not designated the first opportunity for that use. But they said it'll more than likely debut with a cargo mission launch before it's used for a crewed launch. So as we continue to see missions taking off from Pad 40, be sure to keep a weather eye on the progress of the Pad 40 crew and cargo access tower. There'll be a lot of developments over the next several months. Principal construction is expected to be finished up by the end of this year. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. As you look toward the bottom of the Falcon 9 rocket, you can definitely see some vapors forming there, a good indication that fueling is in fact underway as we expect it to. As you mentioned at the top of the broadcast, it has been a newsy kind of day for SpaceX. Over at Starbase, SpaceX's launch and test site over near Boca Chica Beach in southern Texas. Update on the Starship rocket. The FAA this morning announced the conclusion of the SpaceX-led mishap investigation following the first Starship integrated test flight. That news coming just days after SpaceX completed stacking Starship 25 on top of Booster 9 at Starbase. Important to note that in the FAA's comments, it made it clear that while the mishap investigation has concluded, this is not an immediate jump back into launch of the Starship rocket. There are 63 corrective actions that need to be completed, documented, and submitted for review to the FAA before SpaceX can move to submit a launch license modification. Now, the FAA did not publish those 63 items in full, but did outline a couple of them. A brief rundown on some of those include things like addressing redesigns of vehicle hardware to prevent leaks and fires, redesign of the launch pad to increase robustness, incorporating additional reviews in the design process, and adding analysis and testing of safety critical systems and components, including the autonomous flight safety system. That AFSS is part of Starship that allows for the destruction of the vehicle when it goes off its nominal trajectory as it did during that first flight test. However, it was noted that after the signal was given by the system for destruct, it took a little bit of time before the vehicle actually broke apart, and so there's been some upgrades to address that. SpaceX obviously has made a number of other changes and modifications both to Starship as well as to the launch infrastructure at Starbase. We'll continue to keep you posted on the path to the launch license modification and when the second integrated flight test of Starship is going to be. Of course, there's also a lawsuit that the FAA is facing that was brought by several environmental groups led by the Center for Biological Diversity, keeping tabs on that as well. If you want to read more on all of that, we have a few articles up on that on our website, spaceflightnow.com. So you can pop over there and read up on it a little bit more if you care to. Now T-minus 27 minutes, 5 seconds and counting on the current mission at hand, the Starlink 6-14 mission. No T-minus 26 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. We're about 6.5 minutes or so from the big vent from the strong back. Another good visual milestone of the fueling progress of the Falcon 9 rocket, so we'll keep eyes on that. But for now, as we're talking about the vehicle itself, let's go ahead and give you a rundown of the Falcon 9 for those of you who may not be as familiar with it or just want a little refresher on the vehicle launching tonight. This Falcon 9 rocket stands about 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of the rocket is comprised of the first stage, about 2/3 or so of the Falcon 9. This first stage booster flying today has made 6 previous flights before. It's flying for the 7th time tonight. Its designated tail number is Booster 1076. At the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, you see the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, the black carbon fiber landing legs used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, tonight SpaceX is using the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. Moving on up the rocket, as we hit T-minus 25 minutes and counting. This is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. Taking a look at that image on the right, you see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. They are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it returns through the atmosphere, coming tail first like a dart. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure it's a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle also safely housed inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. That upper stage, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine. It features a large nozzle that is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. Produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust and will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 or kerosene and liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. After satellite deployment, it will ignite for a third time. It will be the deorbit burn to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere. Well, it will burn up, decreasing the risk of creating orbital debris from this mission. And finally, top of the Falcon 9, these are the payload fairings used to encapsulate the 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites. The payload fairings are made of a carbon composite material, 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves of the payload fairings will be recovered further downrange. Again, SpaceX is using the recovery ship Doug tonight. Payload fairings gently splash down under parachutes. Like the Falcon 9 first stage, the payload fairings will be ferried on back to Port Canaveral here in Cape Canaveral, where they will be refurbished, readied again for flight, and prepared for another mission. Now T-minus 22 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Again, we're just about 2.5 minutes away from the so-called big vent. Another key milestone in the fueling process here. And then at T-minus 16 minutes, liquid oxygen will start flowing onto the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Now T-minus 20 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. Kerosene should be finished loading onto the second stage as we see the start of the so-called big vent from the strong back now. Coming right about on schedule at T-minus 20 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. At this point, we're about 4 minutes away from liquid oxygen starting to be loaded onto the second stage of the Falcon 9. Fueling continues to move, it appears nominally, as we get closer to the T-minus 0 liftoff, again targeting 11:12 p.m. tonight. Now T-minus 17 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 15 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. near the end of the big vent from the strong back. Want to thank the nearly 6,000 of you who are watching us, joining us live. If you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, share the stream, that would be a big help to us in sharing this coverage with those who have not already joined us this evening. And if you have already hit the like button, well, thank you for helping to chip in. As we get down to the last, now under 15 minutes before liftoff, want to go through some of the mission stats where this particular Falcon 9 mission will land in the overall landscape for SpaceX after liftoff tonight. This will be the 7th flight of booster 1076. We'll go over its particular missions it's flown in just a little bit. This is the 254th Falcon 9 launch to date. It is the 60th Falcon 9 launch just this year of 2023. The 63rd SpaceX orbital launch of 2023. New stat that we're adding and keeping track of. This is the 84th Falcon launch, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy vehicles over the last 365 days. Taking a look at that rolling 365-day mark. This will be the 142nd SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, the 197th overall orbital launch from this pad, and it'll mark the 47th orbital launch from Cape Canaveral in 2023. That includes launches from both Cape Canaveral Space Force Station as well as NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Now T-minus 13 minutes, 17 seconds, and counting. Now T-minus 12 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. Want to thank one of our moderators in the live chat, Astro Joe, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Thank you, Joe, for helping to bring more people into our membership coverage. Of course, being a channel member is a great way to get more involved with what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Not only do our members have access to 4K camera views of our launches from the Space Coast, we also have access to member-only videos, as well as discounts in our online shop. So thanks again to one of our moderators, one of our fantastic moderators, Astro Joe, for gifting that membership, and to, looks like Dolphin's State of Mind, who was gifted that membership. Welcome to channel membership. Hope you enjoy all the perks that come with it. Now T-minus 11 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. So we approach the final 10 minutes of the count for this Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to make its 7th flight with this particular booster. T-minus 10 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 8 minutes, 11 seconds and counting. We're just about a minute away from the start of the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. Again, that involves flowing small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Taking a peek at our live chat, want to thank Matthew Bridwell for joining our YouTube channel at the Mission Specialist member. Thank you so much for joining us at that level. Also want to give our appreciation to Alan Gable for your $20 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Alan, as well as Matthew for helping to support our coverage of the space program. Lots coming up, including less than 12 hours from now, as we have an Atlas V launch on the horizon, the first in nearly 10 months. Have a little bit more on that as we get closer to that launch as well. Coming up tomorrow morning, now T-minus 7 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. Did mention this will be the 64th launch, or 63rd launch this year for SpaceX, 63rd orbital launch. Giving you a sense of the overall landscape of SpaceX Falcon launches. Taking a look at a timeline bar graph here of what those launches have looked like over the years. Of course, starting back in 2010, or just had a couple. Going all the way up towards the far end, the right side of that bar graph. You can see just how much the launch cadence has increased over the last just couple of years. At this point, it's only, what, September 8th, and we've already doubled the number of launches for all of 2021. Now T-minus 5 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Right about now, we should start to see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairing start to open, and the beginning of the strong back retract beginning. This is when the strong back or the transporter erector will tilt back about 1.5 degrees, leaning back away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It'll stay in that position until liftoff, when it will lean back far more rapidly, clearing the way for the Falcon 9 to leap off the pad. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank Christopher Brumet for your $7.70 super chat, saying hello from Canada, space for all. It certainly is space for all tonight, as we are looking toward good launch, now getting ready to lift off in just about 3.5 minutes from now.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
T-minus 2 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. You're the call out for stage 1 LOX loading complete. Again, the reason we haven't been bringing you SpaceX mission audio up to this point is because SpaceX has not been providing mission audio up to this point. Now that they've started their video on X, we're able to bring that to you, so you'll hear periodic call-outs as we enter the last 2 minutes of the count here, getting ready for liftoff at 11:12 p.m. Eastern tonight, just 2 minutes, 8 seconds away from now. As we get close to the last couple minutes, also want to thank Bubblegum and Duct Tape for your $20 Super Chat donation. Thank you so much for that. And to Heidi Salaka for your $10 Super Chat donation. And Rosie Wren, the queen of YouTube forever, who's been a member for 1 month, saying feels good to be a member.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
Feels good to have you here, Rosie. You're the caller for Stage 2 LOX loading complete. Entering the final minute and a half before liftoff here of the Falcon 9 rocket. Really want to thank the nearly 15,000 of you who have joined us tonight. If you haven't hit the like button, if you could do so, that'd be a great help. Help a few more people find our coverage as we enter the last minute of count.
Ground gas closeouts.
Getting ready for the launch director to give their final go for liftoff, coming up in about 10 seconds. Now 50 seconds to go.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
And we hear that call out. This Falcon 9 is go for launch as we enter the final 30 seconds of the count.
T-minus 30
The final seconds. Take a look out. Watch out for the green flash of the T-tab. That is the ignition fluid. As we get ready to launch. Coming up now in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Starlink 6-12 mission. Now 40 seconds into flight. Hearing the rumble of those 9 Merlin engines from here at the press site. The side view tracking camera coming to us courtesy of Pete Carson's, who's bringing us these great images as the Falcon 9 climbs up into the clouds there. T plus 1 minute, 18 seconds and counting into flight. Now 1 minute, 44 seconds into the flight. Coming up on the MVAC chill down. 2 minutes into this mission, we are approaching the main engine cutoff, otherwise known as MECO. The Merlin engines will shut down, followed by stage separation and ignition of the upper stage. Jettison of those payload fairings will come following after that. Again, they will be retrieved in the Atlantic by SpaceX's recovery vessel, Doug, tonight.
MECO.
And you see their stage separation, the onboard cameras.
And back ignition.
You see that Merlin vacuum engine now coming to life there on the right-hand side of your screen. On the left-hand side, you see the Falcon 9 first stage engine, or Falcon 9 first stage booster, making its way back down to Florida. And you see some beautiful views there, that glimpse of those payload fairings separating from the Falcon 9 rocket. Just a gorgeous shot again, this tracking camera from Pete Carson's. And you can see still on your screen there, every now and again, just a little glimpse of those fairing halves reflecting off the light of the engines. See on the top left-hand side of your screen, just a little glimpse of those. Now T plus 3 minutes, 49 seconds into flight. Now T plus 4 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. We're less than 2 minutes away from the first stage entry burn beginning. That'll last from T plus 6 minutes, 9 seconds
Acquisition of signal Bermuda.
6 minutes, 31 seconds. The view here you're seeing on your screen is still the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. That is the Merlin vacuum engine glowing brightly. Here's a view from on board on the right-hand side of your screen. That is the second stage on the right. Dark views of the first stage on your left. That's because the entry burn is still a little over a minute away from starting. Now T plus 5 minutes into flight of the Starlink 6-14 mission. So far, everything appears to be moving nominally in this mission.
Nominal trajectory.
Now T plus 6 minutes, 4 seconds into flight. We're just a second away from the start of the first stage entry burn beginning.
Stage 1 FTS says safe.
You'll see that on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Switching over to Pete Carson's view. See that? I believe that's the entry burn underway.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
Stage
There's the
2
views
FTS
from
safe.
Vieira, just south of our position here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Now T plus 7 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. less than a minute away from the start of the landing burn. Again, the first stage booster on the left-hand
Nominal
side of your
trajectory.
screen is going to be landing on the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas out in the Atlantic Ocean. It's made its 7th liftoff, going for its 7th landing tonight. Quite a number of missions for this particular first stage booster, though it is comparatively far from being a flight leader for
Expected
SpaceX.
loss of signal, Cape.
So the company does have 2
Stage 1
boosters,
transonic.
B-1058 and B-1060, that have both launched and landed 16 times. SpaceX is working its way toward certifying its Falcon 9 first stage boosters for up to 20 missions. Now T+8 minutes into flight. First stage landing burn expected to be beginning right now on the timeline. These live camera views on a bit of a delay from
Second
SpaceX.
stage
We
and
should
terminal
start to
guidance.
see it. Yep, there it goes.
Stage 1 landing burn.
See the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas coming into view on the right-hand
Stage
side
1
of your
landing
screen
leg
as well as
deploy.
the left. And
Stage
a
1
good
landing
touchdown
confirmed.
with that Falcon 9 first stage. Landing for the 7th time.
Seago.
Now T plus 9 minutes, 15 seconds into flight. Did hear the call out for SECO, the second stage engine cutoff. The Falcon 9 second stage will go into a coast period until T plus 54 minutes, 4 seconds. Again, normally we would be showing you the trajectory map of the mission from here and continue to track this launch as it goes along, but unfortunately SpaceX, as we mentioned at various points in this broadcast, is not providing either mission audio or live real-time updates as the mission progresses, so we're going to have to pull away from that for now. We will be sure to keep you updated on the progress of the mission as we continue on until payload deployment, coming up at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 14 seconds from now. Now T plus 11 minutes, 35 seconds into the count. As we are getting ready to wrap up our coverage of this particular mission, do want to let you know that we do have one more bit of launch excitement on the literal and proverbial horizon coming up in, gosh, not as many hours as we would all like it for it to be away, but That's the name of the game here. Taking a look now, not at pad 40, but this is Slick 41, the pad operated by United Launch Alliance as they are preparing to launch the rocket you see there on the center of your screen. That is an Atlas V rocket in the 551 configuration. That means it has 5 solid rocket boosters at the bottom of the first stage of the Atlas rocket. It has its long 5-meter diameter payload fairings at the top. This is the most powerful configuration of the Atlas V rocket, getting ready to make a mission launch tomorrow morning called NROL 107, also known as Silent Barker. Joint mission between Space Force as well as the National Reconnaissance Office. This will be the final national security mission that an Atlas V rocket will launch on behalf of the NRO. They've launched 17 to date. This will be number 18 and final. ULA also has one more national security launch on an Atlas V rocket that's coming up next year. But this again will be the final mission that's launching for the National Reconnaissance Office. That is before the Vulcan rocket makes its debut. Vulcan does need to launch twice on 2 certification missions before it is able to fly national security mission launches. So expect the first one of those likely in 2024. This mission is getting ready to launch at 8:51 a.m. Eastern Time, 12:51 UTC. And so, as you may have seen on our YouTube channel, we already have the live stream primed and ready for that. We will have robust coverage as we did tonight on that mission. This is the first Atlas V launch of the year. So looking forward to seeing, as Tori Bruno would call it, the mighty Atlas take to the skies in just a handful of hours. Again, returning to the mission tonight, very briefly, we are unable to provide the trajectory or the mission audio as we have historically, as SpaceX is no longer providing that as of now on its missions. And so we'll continue to update you on the deployment of the Starlink satellites coming up 1 hour, 5 minutes, 14 seconds into flight. So momentarily we will shift things back over to Launchpad Live if you'd like to continue keeping eyes on the pads here at Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Again, we will have our coverage of the mission that you see here on the center of your screen. Oh, flipped over to pad 40 again. And this is where the Falcon 9 just launched from, and you see the strong back already beginning to return to its upright position as it was at liftoff. This is part of SpaceX's updated turnaround procedure as they are able to flip this pad around and launch in less than 4 days. It's not to say that there always will be a launch every 4 days from this pad, but that's about the pace that we've been seeing for the last several weeks or so. And as SpaceX continues to increase its launch cadence, founder Elon Musk said they're pushing towards 10 mission launches per month. That includes launches from both of its launch sites here in Florida as well as in California at Vandenberg Space Force Base. They are certainly trending toward that much more rapid launch cadence, and things like this, bringing the strong back upright, is part of making that happen. So again, with that, we'll turn you back over to Launchpad Live at this time. Our live coverage of the Silent Barker mission launching aboard the Atlas V rocket, set to begin at 6:45 tomorrow morning. Great way to start a Saturday morning with a daylight launch of an Atlas V rocket. So with that, for Stephen Young, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we will see you next time.